Hi, it's Dougie Wood, and in this video I'm going to explain to you all things related to SharePoint Search. Starting off, I'm going to be talking about search from a high level within Microsoft 365, and then I'm going to be going through and explaining how to search SharePoint in different areas of SharePoint, along with some best practices and answering some frequently asked questions along the way. So let's take a look. So the first thing is to talk about actually searching Microsoft 365. So how to search Microsoft 365. If we think of Microsoft 365 as a collection of products, so we've got things like SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, Outlook, things like that, and they're all inside this collection, then the top layer of this is Office.com. So by going to Google, then going to Office.com, and then logging in with my Microsoft 365 email address and password, I'm going to be presented with this page. Now you can see that there's a search bar across the top up here as well. Now this search bar, the purpose of this is to be able to search everything you have access to within inside that Microsoft 365 environment. So for example, content which is coming from places like Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, basically everything I have access to I can search from in here. But it's not only going to be pulling out files, it's also going to be pulling out, say for example, contact records of people that I could search for. I could search for SharePoint sites, or if I just wanted to just jump directly into an application, I could search for OneDrive and I can just jump directly into that there. Or I could search for someone's name and find people like this, and by clicking on it, it'll then open up their kind of contact record and information about sort of documents that I'm working on alongside those particular people. So the search bar here, there's pros and cons to it. The main benefit of using this search bar is that it's going to find content wherever it lives. So say for example, I just search the word example, I can see content here from all areas. So I can see Word documents, images, news articles from SharePoint sites and things like that. I can then drill down further using these filter bars across the top of my page. So I could filter them down by files, SharePoint sites, by people, news articles, messages, images. These are all just high level ways we can break down that content. Further than that, we can also apply filters like file type. So I could say, well, I'm looking for a Word document, and then that's going to filter down, and then I've found this Word document. Now, typically when you're searching this, I mean, this is just my demo test environment, so there's not that much content in here at the moment. But if this was your real world company Microsoft 365 search page, you would have loads of results here. So the kind of con of using this is that actually you'll have tons and tons of results that you need to filter through. However, the benefit of searching from here is that, say for example, you were looking for a document, you can't remember, did you see it in kind of your OneDrive? Was it in a SharePoint site? Was it from an email? Was it a news article? You don't know exactly where you saw that content, but you can use this area of Office.com to search to find content throughout all of Microsoft 365 and then narrow it down using those filters to find the specific content you're looking for. So that brings on to the next question, how to search SharePoint Hub Sites. Now I could get to my Hub site, which is essentially my intranet page, by using the search bar from Office.com, searching for Hub, because that's the name of my Hub site, and that's going to take me to the home page of my Hub site, which is my intranet homepage. Some people just go directly to the URL. This is actually just taking me via the search page. So this is now my SharePoint search bar across my Hub site. Now you'll notice that the text within inside of here actually says search across sites, because actually the content that I'm searching within here is no longer searching for things like people or apps or kind of content from anything other than SharePoint. It's only searching in the context of the SharePoint intranet. Now with a SharePoint Hub site, they're connected to multiple other sites. So you have things like communication sites or team sites, department sites. They're all linked or associated to this hub site. So actually what we're searching is all the sites in our intranet across the top bar up here. And then it's only going to be bringing me back content which is related to news articles, files, and sites. So now if I search for the word example in here, you'll then see I've got the same kind of content that I was looking at before, but it'll actually be a smaller amount of content because it's not pulling out content from other areas other than SharePoint. You can still see though I've got the same options for filtering by files, sites, news, images, and things like that. And there's other types of filtering we can do within inside of searching our hub sites as well. In fact, a common question I'm often asked is how to SharePoint search the last modified date of a document inside of SharePoint Search. And we can do that using this last modified drop down inside the search results here. So we can find documents not only based on the kind of by searching the sort of title and things like that, but also the last modified date. So I could see documents that I've created in the last 24 hours, the past week, the past month, past 3 months, or I can set a date range here as well. So let's say, for example, I've created a document. I can't exactly remember where it was, but it's somewhere in the intranet, and I know I've created it in the last month. I can use that filter, and there we go. We found my example document that I was looking for. So that brings me to the next question then. How to actually search a SharePoint site. So when we're talking about a SharePoint site, we're talking then about not the top layer of the SharePoint sites, but actually the sort of sub layers of your intranet, which are associated to your hub site. So if I just go back to my hub homepage, it's very typical from a SharePoint intranet to have department related areas, which are typically either communication sites or team sites. From an intranet perspective, they're usually communication sites, which look a little bit like this. So let's say, for example, this is my finance SharePoint site. Now, how to search the SharePoint site is the same as everything else, but you can now see the search bar across the top now says search this site. Is now talking about only searching content within this particular SharePoint site, not the whole intranet, not the whole hub, only content which is created within inside of this site. Now you can see I'm only finding news and I'm only finding files. The only difference between searching this box, this search box, and the hub site search box is you can see it's no longer providing suggestions of searching other SharePoint sites. So back on the hub site, you can see in this SharePoint search box, it's suggesting SharePoint sites that could be relevant to my search. Whereas back on the actual department site, it's only showing me news and files that it's related to. Now, if I was to search for that example word again in here, you then see it doesn't find anything because actually that example document that I was looking at earlier was on a completely different site. It was on the HR site. It has nothing to do with finance. So that's why it's not going to find it within this particular site. So again, going back to that pros and cons of where to search for different things, if you look at the extremes, you've got the kind of searching for content within Microsoft 365, which is going to find everything. So there's going to be a lot of results, but you are going to find something. It's just going to take a little bit more time. So if you didn't know where something lived, you can go and search inside of Microsoft 365, and you'll then find it with using filters and things like that. But it might take some time. The pro of actually, if you knew actually I'm looking for a finance related document, so it's going to live on the finance site, you can come here. And the pro is that actually there'll be a lot less results, so it will take you a lot less time to find the document if you were to search within this area. So now we understand how to search a SharePoint site. Then let's talk about how to search a SharePoint document library. Now, by default, every SharePoint site will have a single place where you can store documents. You can add more document libraries, but you have a single one that's always created on a site. It's usually linked across the top up here, but if you wanted to get to it via the sort of the back route, you can click on the cog, click on site contents, and then you can click on the documents here. Now this will show you all of the files and folders that this document library contains. Now you can see the search bar across the top now says search this library. So we've gone down a layer again. No longer are we searching that kind of SharePoint site layer, which is searching for all content, all documents, all news articles, all events, all content within that finance department site. We are only now searching the documents within inside of this department site. So now it says search this library. So I can search for folders, or I could search for actual individual files as well. So now when I search in here, you can see it's now providing this to me. Rather than as a search results page, it's searching the actual document library and providing it to me as an actual kind of document library view. So this is almost like the bottom sort of end of what could possibly be searched. So if you think about it from Microsoft 365, Office.com is the very top, searches absolutely everything. You've then got the Hub Site Search, which is searching everything within your intranet. You then have the SharePoint Site Search, which is then searching only on a department-specific site, without at the sort of bottom level, which is the Document Library, where we know definitely these are where the documents I'm looking for actually lives. But this can be refined a little bit further even from here. And what I mean by that is there's typically a frequently asked question about how to filter a SharePoint document library. So this is what we're referring to as tagging documents, or often it's known, the technical term is metadata, where we can tag documents with certain things we can then use to filter those documents down further even after we've searched for them. So let's take a little look at how we actually set these up. So some tags might be based on sort of document type, or they might be a review date of a document, or they might be a document owner that you want to search by. So we can add all these by adding these columns. So when you click on add column in here, you can see these are all the different types of columns we can add, or different types of tags. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but some of the common ones are things like choice fields. So choice fields are essentially a set of choices that you predefine to say it's a document type, and then you can tag it with, say, policy, a form, a procedure, a handbook, a training guide, whatever it is, you could tag it with that to help further refine the search results. You've also got things like date and time, so whether it be a review date to sort of say, or when something was approved, or some other kind of key date which relates to that document. Things like person fields, so you can actually say who is the owner of the document and then filter by who is, say, for example, an owner. Or maybe it could be a location-based sort of thing. So it's related to a particular factory location or office location or something like that. So let's take a little look at a choice option. So I'm going to use choice and I'm going to create me a document type field. So my document types might be, say, for example, it's a form, it's a policy, it's a training guide. Um, I quite like these as well because you can actually change these to have your own kind of colors as well. So you can pick from some predefined colors from this so they can actually stand out and look a little bit different. You can also choose whether you want people to add manual values into this. To be honest, I typically say to people, don't allow people to do that because you'll end up with duplications or spelling mistakes or things like that. But you can also default values. So we could say, for example, all documents in here, let's say, for example, because this is finance related, I might actually add a fourth choice in here to say that it's a contract. And actually, I'm going to default that most of the documents in here are going to be contract related. So I can always change it, but it just means 9 times out of 10, the documents living in here will be contracts. So I want to be able to filter them down by contract. You can also make sure that this is a required field, so it has to be populated, and it'll have a little moan and sort of flag at you if you don't actually have them tagged. And you can also allow multiple selections as well. So you can choose to have, it could be a policy and it's a training guide, for example. So then I click on save, and that's going to add my column on here. So you can see because it's a required field, it is complaining at me that it wants me to actually tag these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my kind of contracts in here. I can choose to edit in grid view, which means it's put it into like a spreadsheet mode, and I'm going to select this is contract. Let's actually just change one of my test documents here. I'm just going to create this as a training guide. These don't need to match, by the way. This could actually just be something like how to do X, Y, Z training. So it doesn't actually have to match the category name, the document type name, or anything like that. It's just what it's categorized as. So I'm going to say this is a training guide, whereas the rest of these, and this is the cool bit as well, like Excel, you can drag this down and you can multiple select properties at the same time. Then by clicking on exit grid view, you can then see I've then filtered this down. So I could search my document library, and that would actually give me the results. So I probably want to actually have, say, a couple of different training documents in here. So I'm going to change this one, say how to ABC guide, and this one's going to be my training guide as well. So I could search this and I could say, for example, contract, and you'll see it will actually bring up all the ones which are contract related. It might just take a few minutes actually for the search crawl to pick up, but once it's actually done that, it would only pull out the contract related ones which I've searched for. We can also choose to filter this down as well. So if I just come back out of the search area like this, I can choose to filter this myself. So by clicking on this drop down, I can click a filter by, and then I can say I'm only interested in, say, training guides, and then that's going to filter this down further for me as well. So there's really useful ways you can combine filtering with the searching options inside of SharePoint to really refine down to find the documents you are looking for. So let's talk a little bit about some other kind of frequently asked questions as well when we're talking about SharePoint Search. So one of those is, does SharePoint search within documents? The answer is yes. SharePoint Search will search not only the title and any kind of sort of text that is in the title, but it also searches all of the content of the document as well. So if I just take you back to that example search we were looking at via the Hub search, you can actually see when I've searched the word example, not only has it got the title example, but also in the body of the text, it's found the word example test text. For this is the example that's then pulled out. So it's actually searched the document inside of it and pulled out that information. So to answer the question, yes, definitely SharePoint does search within inside of the document. It's not just going off the title, so don't feel like you need to have a really long title. If anything, the title should be short and punchy rather than having something long-winded, as it will find the context of the text inside of it. Another common thing I get asked is, what are some SharePoint search best practices? So within this, there's a couple of things to mention. I would strongly suggest that you consider almost like the keywords you're going to have inside of your document. Now, anyone who kind of works with kind of websites or creating content for social media and things like that will potentially be aware of the phrase keywords, which basically means things which are going to stand out to a search engine. But it's also things that people are going to be searching for. Now, what I search for might be different to what you're searching for to find the same content. So it's worth thinking about the different ways people might phrase things. Say, for example, I might refer to a HR department, where someone else might say human resources department. So actually having both of those types of tags, although they mean exactly the same thing, inside of your Word document, you should probably try to refer to HR and human resources inside of the document, so that if I was to search for HR, but you were to search for human resources, we're both going to find the same content. So think about things like I was saying before. Make sure the titles of your documents aren't too long, but they are containing the kind of key punchy bits that is obvious of what those documents are. And then the document itself can contain those kind of extra keywords and phrases and things like that. And there's no harm even having almost like a keyword kind of glossary or something like that inside of your document as well, to make sure that it's being picked up by the SharePoint search engine to make it easier for people to find those things. And as I say, making sure that the content is actually unique as well, because if the content is too similar, it will then be difficult for SharePoint Search to know exactly which one to prioritize and to boost to the top of the SharePoint Search results page. The next commonly asked question is SharePoint Search case sensitive? And the answer is no. Let's take, for example, our department site, and if I was just to put in all capital letter contract, you can then see I've then got results here for all the different kind of contracts I've got within inside of my SharePoint site, and it's not at all case sensitive. Another question that I get asked is, what is SharePoint Search Crawl? So crawling is the process of gathering the content for search. Now, this typically happens quite quickly. Specifically at the SharePoint site level, it'll happen very quickly indeed. But sometimes it can get kind of stuck, specifically for things like SharePoint news articles. I've seen that it can be slow at times, and worst case scenario, it may take up to say 24 hours to fully pull through that particular content. So it's very difficult to say how long the crawl will actually take, because the SharePoint search crawl is complete, especially when we're talking about SharePoint Online here. is almost completely out of the hands of not only the sort of site owners, but also the IT team, the departments which are kind of running the infrastructure of a SharePoint site. Because the SharePoint Online search crawl is completely managed by Microsoft, and there's not much you can really do about it. If you're working with on-premise versions of SharePoint, then there are ways you can kind of set the SharePoint search crawl to run on a periodic basis and things like that. But most of this content and the content I'm talking to you about today is all based about SharePoint Online. So unfortunately, you can't really configure much about that SharePoint search crawl, if at all. I hope this answers all your questions about how SharePoint Search works. If it doesn't, please leave a sort of comment below for any questions you have related to SharePoint Search. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel for future SharePoint top tips and tricks.